I've been asked to talk a little bit about neurosurgery in Everett as it was when I started going there in 1959. At that time, there were neurosurgeons in Seattle, a small number, two in Tacoma, one in Spokane, but there were no neurosurgeons north of Seattle till Vancouver, British Columbia, and none south of Seattle except for the two in Tacoma till you got to Portland. So there was a need for neurosurgical coverage in a lot of communities, and Everett was one of them. At that time, I was a new partner with Larry Knopp and Jerry Nolis. The three of us had been recently trained, and we were downtown Seattle, and we were the young Turks, so to speak, as far as what was going to be going on in our view. And one of them was to expand the coverage. Larry and Jerry covered Burien office, and I was assigned to cover the Everett office. At that time, the freeway did not exist, so that in order to get to Everett, you had to go up Highway 99, and it took about an hour. Arrangements were made with a local dermatologist by the name of Dr. Youngquist to use his office on a Wednesday afternoon when he took off. Didn't work that afternoon. And he let us use his office girl, Alpha, and Alpha was his secretary. But it amounted that we received consultations in his office in the afternoon of Wednesday, and then I would see consultations in the hospitals if there were some to be seen. And this went on progressively, got progressively more busy as the service was recognized, and it came about that there was a need to do some surgery up there at the request of the referring doctors. I might add that in that era, 59 in particular, Everett was a general practitioner town, much like Aberdeen was, and they preferred not to let anything go out of town if they could help it, and they didn't encourage specialists unless they were in and out on a referral basis, such as we were doing. So we were tolerated and welcomed at that time. But the demands for doing surgery up there, I personally limited just primarily to spine and rarely maybe a carotid endarterectomy. And then things started to branch out a bit from there, so that we were going up to Mount Vernon and places like that. And the business grew. As a consequence, we opened up an office downtown in Everett, in Drumheller's building. I don't know what it's called now, but it was near the bus depot. And so we had an office, and we had a gal that ran the office. And so we saw more patients, and that required an awful lot of travel from Seattle to Everett, night calls, things of that sort. And it got really a bit overwhelming after a bit, and rather short order. And as a consequence, it got to the point that there was a choice to be made, either to spend all the time in Everett or all the time in Seattle. For a while, I kind of was a bit ambivalent, and even bought a lot in Woodway, thinking I would build a house there and be equally accessible to Everett and Seattle. But it became quite obvious to me that all this travel in a car was pretty non-productive. You're spending too much traveling, and that was taking in the time that you could be seeing patients and doing surgery and so forth. And it got to the decision time that one had to make a choice, and I choose to return full-time to Seattle because there was plenty of business there. And Jack Johnston came on the scene, and he was welcomed with open arms because he came and he took over my office. Everything that we had going, he came in and that was his start. And he ran a nice operation up there, and I think he did well. So that's, at that point, I ceased to go to Everett and spent full time downtown Seattle.